So this is a leftover 2x8 from a recent project, and it's 75 inches long. And so we're going to use it to build a little farmhouse bench. I've got a bunch of scrap 2x4s as well that we're going to use for this project. So we're going to go ahead and go to the design phase and get it all laid out, designed out the way I have in mind. And then we'll come back out to the shop here and put it together. So in the video description below, I'll have a link to the separate video on designing this bench I have in mind. And then we'll pick up back in the shop when I get it all laid out and figure out exactly what we're going to do. All right, so let's take a look at our stock and what we've got here. Most of our parts were cut out of 2x4s. We got those out of 2 2x4s. And then this was a piece of scrap 2x3 that I had that we also are going to need. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to rip all of our 2x4 pieces to the thickness of our 2x3. And this was a design choice. We wouldn't have to do that, but this is a relatively small bench, and I just like the look of this smaller piece of wood. So this one is our leg stretcher. It's 23 inches. And this here is the top leg stretcher, if you will. And these are 11.5 with a 30-degree miter that's not parallel. Now these are 11.25, which is our lower leg stretcher. These are 11.25 from long point to long point, and they have a 10-degree miter, but they are not parallel. And then these will be our little angle pieces. They'll kind of go like this on our leg. And anyhow, these are 30 degrees, but they're 15 7/8, 30 degrees, and those are parallel, obviously. And then these are our legs. Our legs are 17.5 with a 10-degree parallel miter, both sides, okay? So those are all our pieces. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna rip all of our 2x4 pieces to the width of our 2x3, give everything a light sand, and then we'll look at assembly. So as you can see, we've got everything cut down, ripped on the table saw to the same width as our original 2x3. Everything's been sanded off. And this is how the legs will go together. So with that configuration. So we've got our 11.5 30-degree miter up top for our top stretcher, our 11.25 bottom stretcher. Up from the bottom here is 4 inches. And what we're going to do is we're going to put two 3.5-inch screws coming down at a slight angle from the top. And then we're going to do two 3.5-inch screws from the side for simplest construction. And then for the cross stretcher, we'll probably put 2 pocket holes in here rather than drilling through all the way through this, because this piece right here kind of will go center like that to the other set of legs. So I think it'll be easiest just to put in a couple pocket screws. So let me go ahead and get the leg assemblies put together, and then we'll put some pocket holes on this, and then we'll connect our 2 legs, and then we can take a look at the top. So I was in on the computer taking a look at some different ideas in regards to this bench, and decided to make a last minute change to this particular bench. So these pieces that are 11.5 inches we're not actually going to use for this particular build. So we definitely can still use them. But what we're going to do for this particular build is we're going to put a back on this one. So what I've done is I've cut 2 pieces that are 14 1/8 from long point to long point. On the one end we've got a 30-degree miter, and on this end we have 8 degrees. And so the way this is going to work is the leg is still going to connect right at that angle point, like we did previously. But over here we're going to come back From this angle point over to here, I believe it is 3 1/8, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. I will double check that dimension though. So this dimension from that corner over is 3 1/4. So I'll make a mark over 3 1/4 inches, and that's where that leg will go. And this still remains at 4 inches, just like it was previously. Now you say, well, why are we doing that? Well, what we're gonna do is I decided we're gonna put a back on this. Now I had done backs on this style bench previously, and it didn't work out. So then when I did it, I was using 2 2x6s for the seat of the bench, which is plenty comfortable for a bench. But in this one, we're using 2 2x8s, which is even bigger. But what happened on the 2 2x6s, that gives us an 11-inch seat, which is fine for a stool or just a little sitting bench. But when we put the back on it, it pushed us too far forward on the bench, and it just wasn't very comfortable. So what I wound up doing on the second go around, on the stools that I wanted the back, I wound up putting a 2x6, 2x4, 2x6. So I added 3 1/2 inches, and then when I had the back on it, then it was nice and comfy. So I'm trying something similar here, where we're going to have an 8-degree recline on our back of the bench, and so that's why we cut this at 8 degrees. And you'll see how all this goes together here when we get to that point. But and without putting it together, I can't really tell how comfortable it's going to be. So that's part of the reason where this is kind of a prototype. Put it together and see. I'm confident that 8 degrees is good enough, but we may want to kick this out a little bit farther, because our bench is going to be back over here. So our bench seat's only going to go here, so we're kicking it out about 2 inches, 2 1/2 inches. So anyhow, we're going to see once we get it together how comfortable it is. So let's get this together. So what we're going to do, 2 3 1/2-inch screws from the outside on both sides at that 4-inch mark, and then 2 3 1/2 screws from the top plate down. And we're going to get 2 of those assemblies put together, and then we'll come back and take a look at the next step. So now we have both of our leg assemblies together. So this one is backwards. There we go. You want to make sure that when you're putting them together, you got both of the same angles facing the same direction. So you can see on the back side here, we've got our 30 degree and our 30 degree. All right, so now we're going to put in our bottom leg stretcher, and you can see I marked the center, and we're just going to kind of eyeball that center of our stretcher and put those together with some pocket screws. So we'll go ahead and get that done and move on to the next step. So see, now you can see that stretcher is basically the center of this 2x3 is in the center of that mark that we made. I don't have it attached yet, obviously. So then we're going to just use our 2 1/2-inch pocket hole screws on the back side and put it together. And just as a little funny anecdote, I have about 12 of these impacts, and the reason I like to have so many impacts is because I hate changing the bits. And it's really that I don't hate changing the bits, I hate finding the bits. And so it's frustrating for me when I'm trying to find a bit. So I always tell people that work with me, especially my wife and kids also, do not take the bits out of the impacts. There's no need. So if you're looking for a Phillips bit, we have an impact for a Phillips bit. We have an impact for a T25. We have an impact for the square drive in the long and the short. We have an impact for the T15, which we use a lot as well. So we have an impact for every single bit that we typically would use. So don't take the bit out and put your bit in. Find the impact that already has your bit. And then we have like 6 different drills, also regular drills, not impacts, for the various different drill bits that we use all the time. So I have a 3-inch hole saw. I don't want it taken out of that drill. I have a 1.5 inch Forstner bit. I don't want it taken out of the drill. I just want to grab that drill, grab that impact, and get to work. So it's just one of my little pet peeves. And I was just watching a commercial just a minute ago on YouTube where they have a little leash that somehow connects to your drill, and it's called a bit leash. If you look it up, it's a bit leash, and it's a little cable that will hold your bit, and you can switch out, and all your bits would stay tied to your impact. That would probably be cheaper than going and keep buying impacts. But my wife's like, "Why do you keep buying impacts?" Well, because I want one for every single bit that I use. So anyhow, and then so if you got all those impacts, of course you want 20 batteries to go with them. So we have about 30 tools that we probably use, so we've got tons of batteries all the time. We never run out of juice. So anyhow, that's that. Okay, so we're gonna put this stretcher together, and the next step will be cutting our bench boards and get those on place. So there is our completed base. And this will become rock solid when we put our 2 2x8s on here. And then, so we're gonna put our 2 2x8s on here, and then we're gonna screw up from the bottom of our top stretcher here and attach those 2 boards using that. And then, like I said, it will be absolute rock solid construction. You see a lot of benches without that center stretcher on the legs, and it just, to me, it just really adds a lot of support. It really does. Now we're going to be putting in 2 just decorative angles yet. So the way these are going to go in, these are going to go in right from like this. So they're going to go right at that joint right here, right in the middle, and then it'll connect to the bottom side of our bench seat, just for a little added decoration. Okay, so let's get our bench boards on, and then we're going to go from there. So for our bench top, we're just going to be using this leftover piece of 2x8. It is 75 inches long, I think. This was from a job we just did, a custom job we just did, and this is a big piece of leftover. So we're going to cut 2 36-inch pieces off of this, and I'm just going to be using the old cordless skill saw. I'm not going to, it's sprinkling a little bit, so I got my miter saw covered up. So anyhow, we're just going to cut 2 36-inch pieces off of this and use that for our seat of our bench. All right, so all I've done here is I've cut that 2x8 to 36 inches long. Now they do not line up perfectly, but that's okay. We're gonna trim that anyhow, so, and we'll make it perfectly straight. Now, this is another issue. So what I did is I measured from this point to this point. Okay, these are kind of fixed points, and that measures 28¼ inches. Now I know I wanted to come in 4 inches. So I measured in 4 inches and drew a straight line, and you can see up here it matches, but back here it really does not match perfectly. So we're gonna have to, so this is a little bit twisted. So what I'm gonna do is when I go to put my screws in, I'm just gonna make sure that that lines up to that line. But my issue is over here. So this is marked at 28. I really didn't mark it at 28 1/8, which is, or 28 1/4, I guess. So you can see it's off just by a little bit. And so what that tells me is that this is not perfectly straight up and down. We could grab our big square here and kind of confirm that. And you can see we're up tight against the bottom, but we're not square, okay? So we want to make sure that that is square, and wherever it lies, I guess. But we do want to make sure that that is square. You can kind of see it's kind of actually coming in a little bit. So we want to make sure, the same thing here, I guess. What you could see that that is off square there as well. So we just do want to make sure that that is pretty squared up when we go to put this together. So we'll make those adjustments, get it all bolted down, 2.5-inch screws, and we'll move on to the next step. Well, folks, we got issues and we got solution. And I should have known this from past experience. Anytime we're dealing with angles, if your design is off any, it will show up significantly. So we've got these two angles that we'd like to put in here, kind of like that, but you can see we are off dramatically. How we're off that much, I really don't know, to be honest. But we can't dwell on that. So what's the solution? Well, the solution then is to take a long board, which I have here, and I've already cut the one end at the 30-degree angle. We know that's right. We want this to go at 30 degrees. And then what we're going to do on the back side of this, where this horizontal piece is, we're going to scribe it, and then we're going to cut it that long. And we'll do that on both sides. And then we'll have a nice tight fit for our angle piece. So definitely recommend that, though. Seriously, anytime you're dealing with that angle like that, scribe it. Don't go by the plans, because almost invariably it will not be right. So there is the bench, looking good. Now, of course, we could stop right there, and that would be the bench. But we're going to go ahead and put a back on this as well, and see how that looks. I think it's gonna look good, but and we could look at it from the back side here, and you can see those extend out just a little bit, and that's gonna help support our back pieces when we go to mount those on for our back support there. So let's go. We got a couple pieces we got to cut, and then some angles to make on the boards, and we'll talk about that when we get to that point. So let's go ahead and get those extra boards cut that we need, and then we'll come back and talk about how we put it all together. All right, so what we're going to be doing is putting two uprights on the back of our bench here. And these are the two uprights. They're 30 3/4 long. At the top, we did a 30-degree miter, and then at the bottom, that angle is 72 degrees. How did we get 72? Well, what we did here on our miter saw, we cut a board at 45 degrees and then set this board in there. You can see, boom. So we set this at 45, set our angle at 27, and 45 and 27 gives us the 72. Boom. And we came up 5/8 of an inch from the edge of the board too. So that's a key point. Okay. And so this is going to sit. So what I did is I marked this board from the top bevel, came down 15 inches, and so this goes right there, connects at 15 inches, and then you can see where it's going to connect to my leg down here as well. Okay, so that's how all that's going to go together. We're going to use 2.5-inch screws at the bottom, 3.5 screws up top to hold this on there. So let me get these mounted, then we'll go from there. So here is the finished product, and as you can see, it really turned out great. The dimensions and proportions, you know, the bench sits real comfortably. So I was a little bit concerned about the height of the back of it, but from the seat to the top is about 15 inches, and it really seemed to sit real well, hit you on the back right where you want it. So I was real pleased with that overall. And you can see how the back, that top board was just up just a little bit, 4 inches in from the ends, and you can see how that attaches to our leg down there, and how it attached to our seat stretcher there, a leg stretcher. And so good looking bench all the way around. Was just real happy with how it all ultimately turned out, and the construction part of it was, you know, very straightforward, very simple. If we wanted to, we could possibly add X's on the end I thought that might look kind of sharp. We could do away with the diagonal pieces. Those are purely decorative. So we could do away with those, put the X's on the end, and then maybe add a couple more 2x4s on the bottom and have a little shelf or a little crate or something. So you can really modify this little bench any which way you want. But that's the finished product. Hope you like it, and I hope this video gets you inspired to build one for yourself.